Hello, everyone, and welcome to Walker Reads. I am your host, MJ Walker. Today, I will be bringing you the next chapter in my book, Consideration for Others. If you are enjoying what you are hearing, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It truly helps me to develop my channel. Without further ado, I bring you the next chapter in Consideration for Others. Chapter 6. Rules. Fate. I never thought a four-letter word would have such an influence over my thoughts and actions. Never imagined that one day I would be used like a tool to perform the tasks derived of me by the tantalizing power that was fate. Of course, it was also far easier on the mind if one could simply attribute all of the horrible actions committed to a single unearthly power. Nothing rings quite so soundly as fate made me do it. I often thought fate was something reserved for the corniest of romance novels, rambunctious and omnipresent, forever flitting through the outer edges of detection, just beyond our comprehension. I never thought I would be attributing fate, of all things, to the dark deeds I had committed all those weeks ago. Yet if fate had not played a part, then sheer dumb luck and coincidence were apparently enough for me to get away with murder. Ugh. The thought still fills me with dread and disgust. I'm a murderer and should be treated as such, punished as such. Yet my own actions seem to have ensured the silent burial of my deeds. My self-preservation guided me towards the outcome that ensued. Peter was dead, and the local authorities as good as threw their hands up in frustration. Part of me was enraged that such a heinous crime could be committed, and the police force was none the wiser. How was Peter's family to have closure when I still walked the streets, a free man? I found the concept of my actions being guided by a higher power of any sort discomforting, to say the least. I had always envisioned the powers of the universe to be positive and nurturing, not subtly guiding me towards taking the life of another. Yet that seemed to be exactly what was happening. And if fate, in all of its wiles and antics, had no part in the hand I was dealt, well, then it would appear that I was just a terrible person with homicidal tendencies. Such wonderful options I have contrived for myself. Thankfully, for today, my self-revulsion had been put on pause while I babysat Nathan. The little boy was energetic, that being an understatement, and a bright ball of joy and happiness. Not even the gloom of the overcast morning dragging into the early afternoon shed any shadow on his bubbly demeanor. He happily ran circles around my garden boxes, plucking snails off of the budding plants and tossing them into the little metal pail I had set on the rim of the box nearest the house. Even the darkness wielded by the secrets harbored deep in my psyche could do nothing to combat the wealth of happiness radiating off the little boy. I was thankfully bathed in the light of his beautiful little innocent soul. "Come on, Sean, they're gonna get away," the little boy hollered as he ran laps around the third box in line, eyes carefully scanning for the tiny shelled demons that devoured my garden. "Oh, I don't think they're going to get anywhere fast there, bud," I chuckled as I weeded the first box. Nathan had been overjoyed when I had suggested chores outside as an alternative to playing with my old childhood toys. Granted, my toys weren't the greatest, aged and sorely lacking in the ability department. They were just oddly colored chunks of plastic for the most part. However, the boy seemed to be thoroughly smitten with the idea of trouncing through my garden gathering snails. I had briefly entertained the idea of showing the little boy how much fun it could be had by stomping on the little pests, resulting in the satisfying crunch that came with crushing their shells. But the thought was only brief. I could not encourage the boy towards any activities that might guide him in the direction of the path I currently trudged down. Not that crushing snails in the garden necessarily led to one becoming a bona fide serial killer, but any kind of destructive tendencies particularly drew my attention after my experiences. Watching the happy little boy collect the mollusks and toss them into the metal pail brought me an immense cheer that I was wholly unaccustomed to as of late. Observing his unrestrained elation at such a menial task truly served to lighten the darkness clinging to the innermost sanctums of my mind. This child was akin to the best psychologist diving into my brain and telling me exactly what was causing me such angst. He simply provided me relief to the deep sunken pool of sorrow and despair that filled my soul, the self-hatred that continued to claw and scratch at the walls where I had trapped it deep in my brain. I don't know exactly what about the boy brought such feelings to the surface in my twisted and tormented psyche, but I did enjoy the reprieve from the usual assault on my conscience. I realized as the early afternoon crawled ever onward that I truly loved Nathan, loved him as I imagined I would love a child of my own. I had become incredibly charmed with his antics, his personality, the demeanor of his bubbly little being. And however demented my internal landscape had come to be, the love washing over me felt wonderful. It was as I mused over these near alien sensations of love and attachment towards another human being, especially one as innocent and beautiful as the one currently running laps around me and giggling, that another thought occurred to me. I tried to ignore it at first. The nature of the thought was not conducive to the positivity I had been feeling observing the boy, but as it grew, I could hide from it no more. I would kill anyone who laid hands on this boy. Anyone who so much as placed a scratch upon his skin would fetch my cold and unrelenting fury upon their world. It was a terrifying thought. I was becoming violence. The darkness I had endeavored to ensnare and trap deep within my being seemed to be slowly radiating out from its bonds, infecting all that it touched. It would appear that I could not escape or forget the bloody lessons learned on that day. The pleasure wrought from that dastardly deed still prodded at my brain, though I did my damnedest to not acknowledge it. The sensation corrupted all that it made contact with. It would not be ignored. I had thoroughly enjoyed murdering another human being. Of that, I could not be more sure. How strong this sensation was in regards to inciting, a desire to repeat the action, to be stewed in the feeling once more, was still yet to be seen. I truly hoped that I could be strong enough to bury this whole affair and move on with my life. However, the last few weeks of torment were not promising. I still could not sleep without a deluge of horrid dreams assaulting me, and the paranoia, though now mostly unwarranted, was still omniscient. "Sean, Sean, Sean, Sean!" Nathan cried as he literally bounced in front of me. "I got all the snails off your plants." The little boy pointed towards the metal bucket, which was now a quarter full with roughly a dozen of the slow-moving creatures. "What do we do now?" His big bright eyes looked at me inquisitively. The sudden appearance of the unrestrained youthful energy in my face was enough to pull me firmly from my dark line of thoughts and reasoning, and I favored the little boy with a big smile of my own. "Now we are going to relocate these guys so they don't come back and eat up all my veggies. Come on." I stood and offered my hand to the boy, which he quickly grabbed, little fingers barely encompassing one of my own. Scooping up the bucket, we slowly headed towards the perimeter. "Why do the snails eat all your garden plants, Sean?" the little boy inquired thoughtfully. "I'd imagine they eat up my garden because they are hungry, little buddy." I gave him the simplest answer I could produce. "Oh," he mulled this over for a second. "Why don't they just make their own garden so they don't have to eat yours?" "Well, Snails have really small brains, and they don't have hands or feet either, so constructing a garden might be a bit difficult for them. Oh, so adorable in his innocence. But if they can't make their own garden, then why don't you just share with them, Sean? Well, if I shared with the critters, they eat up all my veggies, and I wouldn't have any for myself or to give to you and your mama. Besides, there is plenty of food for snails in the world without my garden being part of the menu. How do snails move around if they don't have feet or hands? They kind of slither, like a snake. Their bodies lie flat on the ground and they kind of just scrunch up and scrooch as they go. Why are they so slimy? The slimy part helps them move around easier. Must not work so well. Only one of them has even tried to climb out of the bucket. I think I'd just climb out of the bucket if I was a snail. Such wisdom, unknowingly preferred by the boy. I had to laugh at his reply before answering. Yeah, I think I'd just climb right out of the bucket too, bud. We reached the perimeter of my property, where a nice square gate was etched into the hedges. Opening the gate, the barren field beyond the property was revealed. Walking through the portal with the little boy, I looked around and observed the pasture before placing the bucket at my feet. Nathan paused, regarding the bucket, crawling with the slowly moving snails, before looking up at me. Now what? I bent over and scooped one of the snails from the bucket. Now we toss these guys into the grass so they can go find another home. I stood and tossed the snail so it sailed through the air before landing in the unkempt blades, blanketing the fallow farmland. Throwing the mollusk incited a bright flash of excitement in Nathan's eyes. You mean you just throws them? That's right. Just throw them out into the grass. It doesn't hurt the snails? My heart melts with this kid. Nah, the snails will be all right, buddy. His concern rapidly vanished, to be replaced fully with joy and excitement. He quickly grabbed up a snail and hucked it into the wind, watching as it sailed just past where my first throw had landed. His bright eyes were wild with happiness. Pretty fun, huh? I said with a sly, knowing smile. Yeah, it is! The little boy started throwing the snails in every which direction, except back towards the property, and hooted and screamed with glee as each sailed through the sky, briefly becoming mollusk aviators. I was momentarily overcome with a strong wave of envy. I was envious of this little boy, so bright and filled with awe. I was envious of the snails, simple lives only interrupted by their short sail through the winds. I wish I could fly. I imagine it would make escaping my problems that much easier. I made no delusions for myself that fleeing my issues was not healthy, but I figured it would work out better for my sanity. Not that I would ever find out, of course. I couldn't really see myself leaving this town, leaving this house. The ghosts of my crime had tainted everywhere I had walked. Yet I knew intrinsically that those ghosts would surely follow me wherever I went. I may be escaping the scene of the crime, may even be escaping the memories, but those ghosts would surely endeavor to not let me forget what I had done. I had also learned that it was far easier to cope with my demons if I had some positive memories and interactions to combat the darkness. And Nathan was here, not anywhere else. The feelings I had been developing for his mother aside, this kid had done wonders for my decaying mind. A sort of clarity, if you will, was imbued with the child's presence. In my world of darkness and despair, I was forever grateful for the light shed by Nathan. It didn't take long for the child to dispense the little critters amongst the fields of grass, hooting and giggling as he did so. Nathan was having such fun with the task that once the bucket was empty of mollusks, he looked rather disappointed. He double-checked that the bucket was indeed empty, even went as far as to lift up the pail and search the immediate vicinity for any snails as crafty as the little boy had stated to be, if he were one, only to reveal that all of the critters had been deftly relocated. He stuck out his bottom lip in an adorable pout as he came to the realization that all of the fun was now over. There's no more snails, Sean. The way the kid said it, it seemed more like a complaint than a declaration. That does seem to be the case. Good job, buddy. I offered him a high five. The disappointment was only enough to stall the boy for a short moment before a big grin burst across his face and he swung his hand up to meet mine. What do we do now, Sean? His big brown eyes regarded the empty bucket once more, as if to confirm that the snails had all been dispersed. Well, I had to pause and consider this. I wasn't going to be doing this today, but I took another pause to let the anticipation build and partially to solidify what it was I was deciding to do with the kid. What is it? What is it? Nathan jumped in place and wriggled his little body, the bright smile never leaving his tiny face. It can be pretty gross, so we can go back inside if you don't want to. I teased the boy more. Aw, come on, Sean. He stood upright, defiant fists placed firmly on his hips, and gave a hard little stamp. I'm a big boy. I can do anything. All right. I raised my hands in mock defeat. Why don't you grab that bucket and we'll go get started on the next task? I watched as Nathan snatched up the bucket and ran back through the gate and towards the house. The boundless energy of youth continued to astonish me. I vaguely recall in the shadowy memories of my childhood being filled with such cosmic fuel. It was akin to having liquid sunshine coursing through your veins, making every muscle sing in ecstasy. Nowadays, my morning cup of joe was necessary to get my system kick-started. Not that I needed caffeine to wake my body up, but it certainly didn't hurt. Making my way after the child, slower of course, I paused to close the gate firmly behind me, sure to slide the bolt home and shackle the lock. One could never be too careful when being hunted by koalas and dead guys. I had made it halfway back towards the house when Nathan's momentum carried him back over to me once more. Bucket now deposited where it had sat on the rim of the garden box prior. Hurry up, slowpoke, he giggled as he began to run circles around me once more. You keep that up and you'll be too dizzy to play with earthworms, I said, slyly beginning to reveal our next task. Nathan's eyes grew wide with excitement. We're going to play with some worms? He nearly screamed at me. Well, that's part of what we're doing. We're going to be turning over my compost pile and adding in some earthworms to help break down the stuff to healthy fertilizer. I wasn't sure if Nathan knew what a compost pile was, but I'm sure the allure of playing with worms would have trumped any feelings about turning this stinking, rotting pile of food bits. I picked up the bucket and made my way towards my tool shed, where I had stored the worms for when I was ready to turn the pile. I hadn't anticipated doing it today, but I suppose today was as good, if not better, than tomorrow. And with the bubbly and joyous child bouncing around me, it was hard to mope over the less than desirable chores. Swapping the bucket for the small box containing the worms mired in a swathe of healthy dirt, the two of us then made our way over to the compost. I watched as the little boy became completely enamored with a hummingbird, which had taken this moment to zip on over to one of the feeders I had hung throughout the property. I thoroughly enjoyed the hovering little birds. Sean, Nathan peeked up. Yeah, buddy. How does a hummingbird fly like that? The other birds just fly straight and land. How come the hummingbird can stop in the air and turn around like that? Such an inquisitive little mind. I mused while I watched the child track the little bird as it zipped around the property some more. The hummingbird has really strong, really special wings. It can flap its wings so fast that it can direct its flight, including stopping in midair. It's a lot like a helicopter. Instead of flapping to move forward, the bird adjusts how it flaps so it stays hovering in the air. Does that make sense? I could see the cogs turning behind his little eyes. Kinda. So it's like how Matty Fieldbrook can run backwards faster than the other kids because he practiced it so much? Somewhat. I considered his comparison. I think it would be more along the lines if Matty could run on the ceiling. The other birds simply cannot fly like the hummingbird, even if they try real hard and practice a lot. Just like if you practice a lot, you could probably run faster than this Matty kid can. But no matter how hard you try, humans are simply not equipped to run on the ceiling. Oh, seeming to accept my adjustment to his thought process. Okay. And just like that, Nathan was off, chasing after the hummingbird as it dashed from feeder to feeder. My thoughts remained on the fowl and its particular capabilities as I watched the child scamper about. As beautiful and unique as the creature's capacities were, they came at a cost. The bird might be able to hover and stop on a dime, even change direction drastically in mid-flight, giving the critter an incredible aerial advantage. However, it had to consume massive amounts of food to keep up with the colossal energy output necessary to maintain such maneuvers. So the bird may be incredibly agile, but it had to be constantly on the hunt for food so it could stay agile. Like dancing on the edge of a blade. If you do it right, you can come out unscathed, but one wrong move is liable to get you cut. Hummingbirds were far from the top of the food chain. Of course, the hummingbird never stops to consider its peculiar lot in life, never questions its unending quest for fulfillment. It simply bounces from flower to flower, completing its part in nature's cycle as much as it's feeding itself. Was there a lesson to be learned from the hummingbird in this instance? I doubt the bird resents having to constantly stoke its internal fire. It just continues along the path that it's on, feeding and doing its part. What was my part in this world? If my lot in life was ultimately leading me towards the untimely end of Mr. Bengali, then who was I to begrudge the task nature had set forth for me? That thought process seemed right to me. Nature set this course in front of me. No omniscient, omnipresent being of unknowing power made me a killer by choice. No. Nature has chosen me to correct its wrong. Peter was that wrong. How and why he was that wrong, I do not know, just as how and why the flower feeds the bird is beyond the fowl. Perhaps my dreadful series of actions that led towards that fateful afternoon was merely nature correcting the balance. I did not know Peter very well, but the man was obviously troubled at the very least. One does not typically succumb to the vagrant lifestyle if other options are available. I had no idea what, if any, Peter contributed to society and the world at large. What I did know is that our paths were seemingly destined to cross, and the outcome that ensued was perhaps a calculated move. I don't think nature necessarily wanted to kill Peter, but the balance had to be corrected. Harmony had to be achieved, and I was simply nature's tool in doing so. I reached the compost pile and noticed that Nathan had scampered off after the bird while I had been musing in my thoughts. Watching the child scream with joy as he chased the bird to and fro, I also realized that I had forgotten to grab the spade. Carefully putting the box of worms on top of the closed compost bin, checking that Nathan was still fully occupied with the avian, I returned to the tool shed for the shovel. Questions spawned in my troubled mind as I once again considered the enigma of Peter and my current state of affairs. I could try to understand nature wanting to use me like a tool to remove festering flesh. Nature is a powerful force and I am not above being utilized for its purposes. However, if that was indeed what I had found myself becoming, then what was the deal with the hauntings? If I was to be a tool to the whims of the universe, then why punish me for the deeds carried out? Perhaps it was not nature that endeavored to make me suffer for what I had committed, especially considering the line of reasoning I was currently delving down. Perhaps, whereas nature set the deed before me, my humanity is punishing me. My mind and soul are haunting me because I know that what I did was wrong. How is that possible? Was it possible to be so deeply troubled by something you had done that your own brain would condemn you? Reflecting on the many actions that led to where I currently stood, I suppose nothing was impossible. Shit, before all of this nastiness, I wouldn't have thought it possible that I could even take another's life, let alone revel in the pleasure of it. Yet that was exactly what I had done. But punishment didn't seem to fit the hauntings perfectly. I'm sure that my brain could contrive far worse punishments than being chased by a bell and a dead man. And what was the deal with that damned koala? So then maybe my mind was not attempting to punish me for the heinous crime I had committed. though I truly felt that my actions were in need of reprisal. And if my brain was not endeavoring to make me suffer for what I had done, then what on earth was going on? Why chase me with specters? All things considered, I certainly wouldn't be forgetting this anytime soon. Wait a second. I stopped dead in my tracks, autopiloted body already clutching the forgotten tool. I certainly wouldn't be forgetting this anytime soon. Could that be it? Sean! 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 The little boy's breathless shouting rented me from the tumultuous nimbus that was my mind. I looked down to regard the child as he slid to a stop in front of me. What's up, buddy? I inquired. I was watching the bird, the hummingbird, and he was flying from tree to tree, and then, he just flew away. Oh no, he must be full. Birds can get full too? I don't see why not. They've got pretty small stomachs, so it probably doesn't take a whole lot to fill them up. Oh, he looked a little disappointed. Will he come back? Most likely, I told the boy cheerily. All the hummingbirds around here know I've got feeders up for them, so they come by regularly. We may not see that particular bird again, but we will likely see another before the day is up. Do the birds live nearby? Oh, I don't know, buddy, I said, scratching at the stubble collecting on my chin. I'm sure they live relatively close, but birds can cover great distances in their search for food, so it is also likely that they don't live nearby. Why don't you build them a house so they could just stay here with you? I chuckled at this line of reasoning. That is an excellent idea, bud. Maybe next time I babysit you, we can build some birdhouses for hummingbirds. Would you like that? Yeah, he replied, bouncing happily in place. Okay then, it's a deal. I offered the little boy my hand, and he shook it soberly, his other hand perched on his hip triumphantly. This seemed to conclude the topic, and no sooner had he released my hand than was Nathan giggling and running circles around me. What's the shovel for, Sean? He asked me. That reminded me of the task at hand, kick-starting me into motion. How long had I been just standing there? The shovel, my dear boy, I replied as I once again headed towards the compost pile, will be used to turn and rotate the compost. What's compost? Compost, in this instance, is the black plastic bin I have set up over here. I pointed towards where the bin stood. Inside this bin, I put all of the foodstuffs that I don't eat, but that can still be broken down, like eggshells, coffee grounds, and leftover food bits. Why do you want to break them down? I laughed again. This kid was too cute. I don't break them down, bud, I told him. Once I put them in the bin, I add a little bit of water and let nature do the rest. Mold, mildew, fungus, and our dear friends Mr. Earthworms help to make it into mulch and fertilizer. Oh, he said, contemplating this new information. So then how do we turn it? I'm going to show you, I replied as we reached the pile. First, why don't you hold on to the box of worms here? I handed the little boy the box of worms. I hope you're not hungry, I mocked, slurping down a worm to the delighted giggles of Nathan. I then turned and started releasing the clasps on the side of the compost bin. Now, whenever we're ready to turn the compost, I told him while I unlocked the last clasp, we undo all the little locks on the bin, which lets it open up in half like a treasure chest. I gave the compost bin a hearty shake to dislodge any materials adhered to the inside of the bin, and slowly cracked open one side, releasing a warm, putrid, rotting smell. Ew, Sean, that smells bad, Nathan began, fanning in front of his nose. Yeah, I know, buddy, I replied with a smile. Rotting food never smells too good. Nathan quickly forgot about the pungent odor as I fully removed the compost bin and placed it on the ground just a few feet away from where the now exposed conical-shaped pile of rotting foodstuffs resided. The kaleidoscope of colors and the near swarm of gnats taking to the air completely consumed the little boy's attention. Wow, he awed at the pile. Not too close now, I placed a hand on his shoulder. Your mother would not be pleased if you went home reeking like compost. Here, why don't you help me turn it over? As we churned and shoveled the pile from its current location into the bin's new location, my thoughts once again returned to Peter and the predicament I found myself in. I felt that I was on the cusp of understanding where this path was leading me, the precipice of seeing why nature intended me to be a killer. I was realizing that perhaps my brain was not punishing me, as I previously assumed. Perhaps my brain was just ensuring that I kept my humanity by reminding me just what it cost to take another's life. Murder is serious business, and I would not be forgetting that lesson any time soon. However, relieving that thought may have been, it was immediately overshadowed by another, more ominous line of reasoning. If nature led me to be a killer and my subconscious brain didn't want me to forget the cost of killing, did that mean nature might wish me to kill again? If Peter was my only target, would my brain still be haunting me? And if I was not intended to kill again, why did I derive such pleasure from the deed? Already I could feel the pull of desire on the back of my mind, the beginnings of craving. Surely there were plenty of evil people in the world, plenty of wrongs to be righted, balance to be achieved. It was difficult to believe that an unknowing power like nature wished me to kill people, made me feel like I might truly be losing my mind. However, it felt right. It felt like all of my musings and thoughts on the subject was truly meant to lead to this point. Once my brain danced on the concept of killing again, I felt an incredible explosion of animalistic pleasure throughout my entire body. If nature did not want me to kill again, it was surely sending me the wrong signals. I acknowledged the feeling washing over me, only to have flashbacks of that day in the marsh, nearly gagging on the revulsion that replaced the pleasure as quickly as it had come. Nature might want me to kill, but the thought of murder was sickening. Who was I to take a life? Who was I to decide who lived or died? I wasn't. That was a simple answer. I was no one. To think that I could be utilized like a knife in a surgeon's capable hands was beyond troubling. What if nature wanted me to kill Nathan? I would take my own life before I ever angled such violence towards that innocent little boy, or his beautiful mother for that matter. I would not be a blind tool just killing whatever was put in front of me. I may be losing my sanity, but I still had a firm grasp on my morals and I refused to let go. What I needed was a set of rules, a collection of guiding principles that would enable my homicidal tendencies while facilitating my morals on the matter. Oh, the irony. The sun had long since set as I watched Nathan, fast asleep on the couch. The boy had been relentless in his energy expenditures in our escapades around the property. I could hardly get the kid slowed down for dinner around 7 o'clock before he was back out in the yard chasing down every flying and crawling critter and asking a plethora of questions on each. I endeavored to get the boy a couple of field guides for the area, a natural budding environmentalist that one. Though I had my hands quite full contending with the tireless child, I had still managed to continue my earlier thought train and had made some considerable progress in my mind, though mostly done after Nathan had fallen soundlessly asleep. I was still struggling with the concept of nature wanting me to kill people. It felt cumbersome and outlandish despite also feeling correct. I could not ignore the fact that I greatly enjoyed killing Peter, and that was a pleasure festering in the back of my mind, quietly urging me to do it again. And if I was going to continue along this murderous path, I would at least keep myself from spiraling into the abyss. I had constructed my rules to address these concerns. Though still in its infancy, I had carefully considered and adopted several edicts. First and foremost, no women and children. If I was going to become a murderous being of the serial kind, then the weakest of our society would not be a part of my victim pool. Already and for millennia, women and children have shouldered the brunt of abuse dished out by the hierarchy of our society. I didn't want to add to that list. My targets will consist solely of grown men. Second, predators only. Of the selection of men available, I desired to only select those of which were preying on the weak, those who would rape, abuse, and murder. If I am to become a murderer, I want these despicable excuses for human beings to be my targets. Third, don't get caught. Prison was not a place I wished to explore, voluntarily or otherwise. Fourth, don't get caught. Pretty damn important in my opinion, obviously. Fifth, leave nothing behind and take no trophies. The first part seemed pretty self-explanatory, going hand in hand with the previous two tenets of my rules. The second part was pivotal. Of all the research on serial killers I had done, taking trophies seemed to be the trait that not only connected, but attributed murders to a specific person. Excuse me. I did not wish to be known, therefore taking trophies from my victims was out of the question. I had to do as much as possible to stay under the radar of the local authorities. That's hard enough to do while committing heinous crimes, not to mention if I were collecting damning evidence somewhere in my house. Those were the only rules I could conceive to even make the thought of repeating murder plausible. Murder was still a concept that not only filled me with elation but also with dread and disgust. I knew that the craving whispering at the back of my brain would one day need to be scratched. And if I was to retain my sanity while I committed such a dastardly deeds, then my rules would help me do that. Besides, the craving whispered, there are plenty of predators in the world. How I enjoyed killing that man. End. Chapter 6. Rules. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this chapter and continue on to the next one. Thanks. Have a great day.